Okay, so as I mentioned in the open, it's been a couple of weeks since your faithful hosts have been together on this show since before the Breeders' Cup, which seems like years ago at this point. I won a Breeders' Cup race. John ran second in a Breeders' Cup race, sold a bunch of horses down at Kentucky. So, John, I'm going to toss it over to you. Tell us about your trips. Tell us about all the experiences, all the things you saw, all the foods you ate, all the controversy you stirred up. How was your time off, bud?
Joe, it seems like it's been a long time and yet a whirlwind all at the same time. If that conundrum can actually work in this modern universe, but no, the Breeders' Cup was phenomenal. I thought that Del Mar did a wonderful job. I mean, the weather was perfect, the racetrack was perfect. There was some controversy, I guess, on the fact that it was really expensive to get in, which I agree with. There was more controversy on some horses that got scratched, before they got to enter the gate even. And I had a long conversation with Dr. Balia on, what the protocol is. We can get into a little bit later. But overall, Joe, the Breeders' Cup experience was absolutely phenomenal. Obviously, Nitrogen ran second, and I think has pretty much cemented her position as the favorite going into the Eclipse Awards for the 3-year-old fillies. A big tip of the cap to you guys for Super Corredora. I know you talked about that in great length, and rightfully so, because it ain't easy winning any kind of a Breeders' Cup race, let alone a baby race where you don't know from race to race how they're going to respond and if they're going to take that next leap up. And I think we're going to be sitting, if not next to each other at the Eclipse Awards, certainly, near each other, because I got to believe that Super Corredora has cemented her position as the leader for the 2-year-old filly division. There has not been a 2-year-old filly champion that hasn't won the Breeders' Cup, I believe, this century. So in the past, 25 years, I know there's some, there's a couple of contenders on there, like there always are. But we can talk about that a little bit later as well. And then, Joe, we went literally from the beautiful confines of Del Mar and San Diego down to the beautiful confines of Lexington, and for the beginning of the DJ Stable reduction. And that's in horses, not in pounds, as people can see who are watching the video right now. And the main thing was to try to get 33 horses in the ring and sold. And unfortunately, at first blush with Vixen, we did not get the response that we had wanted, which is actually kind of a silver lining, because we are going to campaign her with our partners as a 4-year-old. So we're doing a little work on her ankle, and she will be ready to go, come March or April of her 4-year-old year, and hopefully starting that campaign as well. But then, Joe, we had 32 horses at the Keeneland sale, and it was not a surprise based on the marketing and all of the work that TaylorMade did to try to promote all 32 horses. But Joe, every single one of them went into the ring. Every single one of them got sold, and sold for more than what we anticipated. They ran through the reserves that we had put on each horse. And what I was surprised about, and this goes to the strength of the buying market right now, Joe, is that all 32 horses went to different end user buyers. So there was never a double up. I mean, that's how deep the bench was of buyers at that sale, at the whole week, whether it was Fasig or Keeneland. And two of our horses are going to Japan. One is going to Australia. And then the remainder are going to be scattered around central Kentucky, and I think 1 or 2 in Florida as well. But it was just a phenomenal week, a whirlwind of a tour, if you will. I don't think you and I even got a chance to talk, other than just a text, congratulating each other on how well the horses did, our respective cares did at the Breeders' Cup. But it was a whirlwind. It was enjoyable. There was a lot of emotions. A couple of horses that we sold, we had in our program for like over a decade. And Mo Green in particular, we bought her as a yearling. We campaigned her on the races. We bred her a number of times, and even had one of her other daughters in our breeding program, Hop Penny, who also sold. But I couldn't be more pleased with the way that everything worked out for us, and just an upswing for the overall general industry. I think, if I can put a bow on it all, I think that we're kind of past that point of no return that we were heading towards, and things are on the upswing, Joe.
What was the point of no return?
I think that we had lost our social license as an industry, and that we had breakdowns, and people were questioning about the humanity of the industry, and the guardrails hadn't been on for a long time, and basically we were running ourselves into extinction in my estimation.
Don't tell that to all the dorks on racing Twitter who still think Paco Lopez being suspended is the greatest outrage in the history of horse racing. A guy who smacked a horse in the face for no reason. But I digress. Yeah, I mean, the sales results, if you're going by those, are, the industry's in good health. But, I wonder, like, how much of that is a bump from the tax law. And I hope that it's sustainable long term. And the other thing, too, is like, obviously the sales results were great across the board, across the sales. I still think that Mike Rapoli is onto something that, aftercare shouldn't even be an issue at this point with all of the money that's changing hands at the sales. And, you still see a lot of stories on social media of horses who end up in kill pens, and, horses who are in bad spots, and, trying to raise the money to buy them or to feed them. So, I don't want to be Debbie Downer, but it's part of me in the back of my mind when I see these like mind blowing sales results is like, well, how come we can't afford to house our horses after they're done racing if all this money is flowing around in the business? So I think that's something just to keep in mind. Going back to what you said about the Eclipse Awards, you mentioned how TaylorMade is so great at marketing your horses, and shout out to the homies at TaylorMade. They're going to put on a full court press, I think, for Sci-Fair to win champion 2-year-old filly, and Medallion Racing obviously is involved with that horse. And I'm not here to dump on her at all. She's had a very nice year, and was obviously much the best in her Breeders' Cup race. She has 3 wins, excuse me. So she has that on her resume. She did beat the boys at the Woodbine Stake. The only thing I'll say is, like, I don't think anybody who has a nice 2-year-old filly wakes up in the morning in like April or May is like, well, I can't wait to run in that turf sprint. I can't wait to run in the juvenile turf sprint. I think that if you have a really nice filly, the goal is to get them to go 2 turns and to get them to run in the juvenile fillies. And Super Corredora did that. And she held off all comers. She went fast early, held off a highly regarded Bob Baffert horse. So I'm not saying that the Sci-Fair doesn't have a case. I just think, the competition is a step below in the juvenile turf sprint. Because even in the Euros, like if you had a really nice Euro, you're going to run in the juvenile fillies turf. The turf sprint is kind of an afterthought for a lot of people. And again, not to dump on her, because she's very, very nice, has had a really good year. Reagan Swinbank is a friend of the show. But I think everybody in the world that has a good 2-year-old filly in the spring or summer is pointing to the race that we won. And, she stepped up off a blowout maiden win and, took on all comers and did it. She also ran second to Bottle of Rouge, who was a grade 1 winner in her race at Del Mar over the summer. So I think that it's not as if she was a 90-1 shot and she was a maiden and she had gotten beaten in all her races. She was a horse that a lot of people liked going into that race for good reason. Super visually impressive in her maiden win. And I think that it's a more important race historically. And I think that ultimately she's going to win, but I think it's close. And I think there is a case to be made for Sci-Fair. But, obviously I'm biased, but Super Corredora won the race that everybody's pointing for when they have a nice juvenile filly. Like it's as if, like, say we won the Kentucky Oaks next year and didn't like have a grade 1 win beyond that, and you might somebody wants to give it to a horse that won a sprint stake on the same day as the Kentucky Oaks. I don't know if I would be down with that. But anyway, it was obviously
just to continue that conversation, because I think it's a legitimate one, and the ballots are going to be going out in about a month or so. So it's certainly worth talking about. But when we had Jaywalk, and Jaywalk won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, the exact same race that Super Corredora won. There was a filly that came in from Europe whose name now escapes me, and I'm sorry.
Newspaper of record.
The newspaper record. Thank you.
Yep.
Yes. Who had credentials out the wazoo over in Europe, came here and won the turf race, not the sprint, but the actual juvenile turf. And there were conversations and discussions back then about, well, what should it be, who should win, and everything like that. And at the end of the day, Jaywalk won in kind of a landslide as far as the voting goes. And the way it was explained to me by some of the voters is that it's the 3 Ds that make a difference when it comes to the Breeders' Cup Juvenile voting. It's distance, dirt, and the United States. And basically, that's more important than speed and turf. And it may not even be in that order, but they put a premium, as our industry does, quite frankly, on 2 turns, dirt, and things that go on here in the States. God damn it, it's America. God damn it, and you better win here. And that's not to say that Cy-Fair isn't a very good filly, because she is daughter of Not This Time. And she was 3 for 4 and lost in a photo in that 4th race. But at the end of the day, it comes down to, I think what you were saying, which is I'd rather have a horse that I know is going to be going for the classic races and the classic distances, and vote accordingly. Now, it's supposed to be a snapshot of where they are. Well, if you polled 9 out of 10 people in the industry and made them lay hand on a Bible and say that I swear on my kids, who would I rather have? I think the majority of them would rather have the gun runner that can run 2 turns rather than the turf sprinter, who is going to be a phenomenal turf sprinter and is a grade 1 winner in her own rights. But just remember the 3 Ds when it comes down to the voting: distance, dirt, and the United States.
I like that. I never heard that, but that's awesome. In fairness, Jaywalk did have the other grade 1 win on her resume, so she had a slightly more beefed up resume. And the only thing I would say is that, the turf sprint is the same distance as a 5 furlong breeze. Like, it is just inherently harder to run 2 turns, especially on dirt. And I do think that should factor in. Like, what was the taller task, running the same distance that you ran in a workout in the morning, or going 2 turns on dirt, and not to mention setting a super fast pace. So it's all in good fun. Like, I expect the TaylorMade team and the Medallion team to, go to bat for their filly, and she is a really nice filly, and I'm going to continue in the spirit of Dale Romans' Senate run, stumping for Super Corredora as we get closer to the Eclipse Awards. So I hope to see you there, buddy.